Okay, so this is Civil3D Corridor for Beginners. This is just the basics of corridors for those who either haven't used them for a while or may not have used them at all before. We do have some of our Auckland staff in the background there. I'm just making organisers for this session so that they will be able to answer any questions you may have during the session. If you type them in the question bar on the GoToWebinar panel, they'll see those come up and should be able to give you some sort of answer, hopefully, during the session. So, if the basic sounds like what you're wanting, keep on listening to this session. So, looking at some sort of corridor, eventually you want to end up with something a little bit like this. Making a basic corridor with this basic shape, plus looking at some of the widening options and elevation options if you've got to modify corridors. Depending on how much time we've got, we'll see how far we can get into that, but we'll certainly do some of it at least.
Dean, are you recording this, mate?
Yep. So let me go and start the session, I guess. The next thing to do will be go straight in and have a look at the demo. There we are. Okay, so starting with Civil3D, let's go and first of all start off with just the basic information you would get from a surveyor for a starting point. We're just going to bring in a surface. In this case, it's a land XML. I don't want alignments, I just want a surface, and we go OK. Alright, basic surface, and like any other 3D surface in Civil3D, you can have a look in the object viewer and rotate it, and it's a fully functional 3D object. So that's what we're wanting to start with, a surface. However you happen to get it, there's multiple different ways you can have a surface. But looking at the corridors, the next step is to go and make an alignment. So let's make a little alignment in here. It's going to be a road centre line, typically, for a corridor, though it could be the centre line of a channel or something of that nature. So we go for alignment creation tools. Now I'm not necessarily going to look heavily into these, into the way you create an alignment, but just call it CL Dean Road. Type will be centre line. Got various options there, but centre line for the centre of a road. You can use design criteria against, in this case it's going to check against Ostroad, so we might as well do that. And let's put on a style of that has a line weight associated with it. Now we're using the ANZ country kit here for our styles and our labels. There we go, okay. So let's make an alignment. I'm going to make an alignment by layout. Let's just draw tangents without curves at the moment. We'll put our curves in. No, let's do it with curves. So if we're doing it with curves, we need to set our spirals and things first. Let's just have circular curves and lay it out with curves. So I'm just going to make it a very basic sort of shape. I like that. And let's put a bit more curvature in that one. Alright, one alignment. The next thing you need to go with that alignment will be a profile. So these are all prerequisites to what you need to create a corridor. So surface, an alignment, and a profile on that alignment. So I'm going to pick the alignment. I'm going to use the launch pad up here to go and make a profile from that, or we could do it on the home tab of the ribbon as well. So let's make a profile from that centre line we've just picked, and we're going to add in the EG surface. Draw and profile view. Now I could go through the wizard for everything to set out that profile view, but really I'm just using this for design at the moment. So I'm just going to accept all the defaults and go create a profile view and pop it over there. Alright, let's make a profile for it. So profile creation tools on that profile view. Design criteria, no, I won't worry about design criteria for that. So let's go for a style of line weight. Default labels will be fine. And we go OK, default name will be fine as well. always snap to the beginning. Then you can turn your own snaps off, and let's go for there, and about there, and make sure you snap to the end as well. Okay, I'm going to show you a common mistake if you miss out snapping onto the end. So let's say we snap to there accidentally or just don't quite make it to the snap point. That's my intentional mistake, and I'll show you what happens with the corridor if you do make that mistake, if you leave either end. If they don't go the full extent of the alignment, you'll see the problem. So I'm going to put in a few curves here now. Free vertical curves, free vertical parabola PVI based. Click near that one, I want it about that long. Click near that one, I want it about that long. And then you can go through and change all those using the grips, etc. if you want to later on, but let's just run with that for the moment. We're looking at corridors, not profiles here. So that's three things: surface, alignment, and a profile. The next thing is the cross-sectional shape for your corridor, which is what we call in Civil3D speak an assembly. So let's go make an assembly, create an assembly, give it the name main assembly, standard assembly if you like. If you're going to use super elevation, you need to tell it what sort of road it's going to be. The standard sort of road is undivided crowned road, which is what you normally have it on. And the rest of it we can just leave default and go OK. And what we do is click on screen for you. We want to make this cross-sectional shape for our roadway or channel or whatever it happens to be. Bund, I suppose it could be. So here's the centerline point. Now they are tiny. Okay, they're drawn to scale. So what I normally do is do a circle, make a center point, and make a circle in my model space, and all my alignments go. Sorry, all my assemblies go within that circle, so I know where to find them when I'm looking for them. So the way these things work is that you need to go and bring up the tool palettes, which is this button here. So I'm going to home tab of the ribbon, that button up there to bring up the tool palettes, and you'll have some A and Z tool palettes. If you can't find those, you right click on the tool palette header, and there'll be some in Civil3D, there'll be these ones in there. If you've got the country kit loaded, you'll have the A and Z content, which is the one I'm using. Alright, there's a whole bunch of these little things. You'll probably get a group of 10 or so probably that you use on a regular basis, and you'll get used to using those, and then when you need something specific you can go and have a search through each of the different options you've got in here. These are all called sub-assemblies. This is the one for the standard lane. Now all of them, you can right click on them and go to the help file, which takes you through to the help file for that particular sub-assembly. So let me just show you that. So let your screens catch up there. There we go. Okay, so each has a little description of how it works and a bit of a picture at the top. It's got a description down here of all the parameters that you fill in when I click on one of these and go to put it on my screen. So it's got a description and what it actually means. So that's very useful. You've also got the option, and we're going to be using these later on, some sub-assemblies, not all, but some, have the ability to, or an optional override, if you like, or a target they can use. So in this case, the width can be overridden for these particular lanes, and the outside elevation can be overridden, and we'll show you how to do that shortly. And there's several different options that different types of objects that can be used to override those two. Further down the bottom, it gives you a description of the behavior of that particular object. And also the right down the bottom is the shape of that particular object and all the little links and points and shapes that go to make up that component, and the names for all of them, because those names are used later on. So if you ever can't work out the names of some of those you're needing, come back and have a look in the help files for that particular subassembly, and there's always a full list down the bottom. Alright, so let's go put this one in. So let's put a piece of lane in. If I click on it, we get the AutoCAD properties. Now where to go? Come back here. So it's just going slow there. Don't really want it there. Try it again. Sorry, my screen's just lagging here with the running the webcast. Let's not have it allowed docking. There we go. Okay, so these are the parameters that were in the help file, but it asks you to fill those in as we go. So you can change them afterwards if you like, just going into the properties of the subassembly, but in this case I'm just going to change the width of this to 3 meters wide only. Alright, my machine hasn't done this for a while, and maybe it's actually the go-to meeting thing. If you're ever trying to select these things and they select and then unhighlight, like those ones are doing now, they're flashing blue and then disappearing, simply restart, save your drawing, restart Civil3D, that fixes it up. In this case that's not an option for me, so I'm going to actually place it in here. So to place them, the first one, and I'll go into their properties later on and change those numbers a different way. So I'm going to select it, pop it on screen, there we go, that's better. I then want to change its side to left and pop it in again. So it can let me change this now, is it? No, it's not. Okay, so if you do ever have that problem, just shut down Civil3D and restart it, should fix it. If not, then you can get it to a different way. You can actually go pick that subassembly. So each one of these is the subassembly, that's why I've pulled off the tool palettes. You can go into the subassembly properties and change its sizes in there. So I can change its width here to 3. And that's going to behave nicely for me. And same with this one. And you can change the slopes and the thickness of each little piece of shape. So we've got a sub-base, base, and 2 pavement layers there. You can change all that stuff in here in the parameters. There's your pave 1, pave 2, different depths of pavement materials, different depths of sub-base and base. In this case I'm just changing the width. The crossfall will be there at 2, which is up here at -2%. I'll leave that for the moment. But that's coming out like that. Okay, so let's put on one side we'll do a curb, shall we say. So there's a bunch of different curbs in here. I'm just going to grab the first one here. Again, the help files will tell you all about it when you need to look, when you need to get into more depth. I'm going to stick it and make sure the side matches. So the side is going to be on the right, and put it in there. Just for kicks and to show you something other than a curb, we can put a shoulder on the other side. If you don't have curbs, we can use shoulders. Shoulder extend all, I guess, and that can go on the left hand side. Again, these parameters can all be changed, and I might change the width of that because that's going to be huge. Yeah. So again, either do it in the AutoCAD properties. So you bring up the AutoCAD properties by selecting it, then go Control 1 or right click properties and change the numbers in here. So the one I want to change the shoulder width, but again my machine's just giving me grief, so I'm going to do it through the subassembly properties and change its width. Find it, there it is, down to about 1, 0.5. And you can just go OK and it'll change it for you. Alright, and then you probably want a bit of a batter slope on either side. So we've got a batters tab here. There's all sorts of different batter slopes you can use. Let me just do something simple here. In fact, if you want just a standard batter slope, I mean, you can use Daylight Standard, which has little channels and things like that in it. When it's in cut or fill. let's not get too complex here at the moment. Wow. Oh, well, what the heck, let's do it. Daylight standard, put that on there, and I'll just accept all the defaults, and then it'll go and cut and fill. You'll see the difference. There's a whole heap of them in here. You need to go and have a look in the help files to see what each one does. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do, but basically, if it's in a fill situation, it's just going to put one link to find the surface. If it's in a cut situation, it's going to cut down, put a little bit of a channel in, and then come up towards the surface. So let's just change that to the right. When we get this constructed, you'll see that. Okay. May need to come back and change those later if the numbers aren't quite right, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so that's your assembly. Each one of these little components is a sub-assembly. The whole thing together is called an assembly, and if you want to select the whole thing, you actually pick the green center line, and that grabs the whole thing when you want an assembly. You can see up in the ribbon, assembly called main. The thing about putting these things together, and you may have noticed when I snapped them together, was that I picked on these little red circles and grey squares to snap them together. And you snap them together like Lego. Those are like little tongs on the top of Lego. If you want to move them again, don't grip edit them. That is, don't pick one, find this grip, and move it down to here. Okay, the reason being that the software still thinks it's attached up there. If I right-click, select that and right-click on it, this should be grayed out where it says clear offset and assembly. You can see it's not. If I go clear offset and assembly, it'll put it back to where the software thinks it actually is. And you can see it's actually grayed out, which is how it should be. So if you want to move these things around, you can, but you do it this way. You select it, you right-click, and you go copy to, move to, or mirror. So I can go move to and tell that to attach down here, and now it doesn't have that offset. Okay, there's some very specific circumstances when you want an offset, but most of the time you don't. So let's put that back. You can go copy to, makes a copy and puts one up there, or you can actually do that between different assemblies if you want. So you can select them and delete them with a delete key on your keyboard. That's fine. And you can also do, for instance, if this one didn't exist on this side, I'll just delete that off. I can pick that one, right-click, and go mirror, and mirror it onto a point on the other side, and I'll swap it around. So those are the functions for working with them. Remember, they snap together like Lego. Don't use the grip edits. Always use those three functions, copy to, move to, or mirror. Okay. So those are our prerequisites for a corridor: a surface, an alignment, a profile, and one of these assemblies. Now we can make our corridor. Let me close that tool palette now. I don't need that anymore. Give myself a bit more screen. Well, now we can make our corridor. So up in the ribbon, home tab of the ribbon, here's the corridors. Click on that, and we go create corridor. Let's give it a name. Good idea to name them. They'll just get called corridor 1, 2, 3 otherwise, which is not very useful. Style is fine. That's the alignment we're going to use, which is the one I made before. The profile, we don't want to run along the existing ground. We want to run it along our nice smooth design profile. If you tell it to run along existing ground, it will do that, but you'll get a very lumpy looking robo surface. The assembly we're going to use, there's my main one that I made before, or use these green pick boxes down the side here to go and pick off screen if you can't remember what you called it. And when you want to pick these things, pick, once again, the assembly, the whole thing, you pick by picking the green center line. Then we tell it a target surface. The target surface is what the batter slope is going to finish on. So we put that on the existing ground surface. We don't need to set any baseline and region parameters to begin with, so we go OK. That's for doing different targets and things like that, but we've got that set, that's what we want, and our corridor is ready to be made, so we go OK. and we should find straight away in the plan view is one roadway corridor made. Now, the first thing you always want to do, I say this over and over again, is whenever you create a 3D object in Civil3D, you're looking at it in 2D when you see it in plan view. You absolutely must check it in 3D. So select your object that you've just created, right click, go to the object viewer, and have a look in 3D. And straight away you can see any mistakes you've made, anything going down to zero elevation, such as this waterfall happening on the end of my model. Okay, I've made a mistake. This was my intentional mistake. If you recall, I stopped the profile that I told this corridor to run along before the end of the alignment, and I'll show you that in a moment. But what happens when it doesn't have a profile to run along? It defaults down to zero elevation, which is the last part of my corridor is down at zero elevation. So that's what this waterfall is. It's actually quite common because if you adjust the alignment, sometimes your profiles get out of, don't have the correct length anymore. So to fix that up, that's quite simple. Go back. If you ever see that, you know it's those waterfalls are caused by your profile not being quite long enough. So it'll be one end or the other, and if you find that, adjust it, snap it together, and simply rebuild your corridor. So here's my corridors collection. You can see it's gone out of date. You can right click and rebuild. Put it on rebuild automatic. Let's put on rebuild automatic for now. You can see that's gone away. Once again, check in 3D to make sure there's no other mistakes. And the object viewer. That's good. Okay. We've got various areas of cut or fill here. It looks like we've got quite a lot of cuts, so I might just change some of that. So I'm going to pick that up, and you can use any of the grips for your profile to just raise and lower it, move it sideways, wherever it's going to be appropriate. I'm just going to pick it up a bit. My corridor was on rebuild automatic, so you can see straight away we've got a lot less cut and more fill going on. And of course you can play around with this as much as you want. Okay, let's go and have a look at the widening functionality, which is really what I'd like to get onto here. Let's go and say that we want a bus bay in here. So this is going from the basic levels of corridors, which is what we've basically covered, how to build a simple corridor. We're going to do something that'll move us a little bit more towards the intermediate level. So let's go and have a look at this widening. Pick my corridor. Oops, pick it by itself would be a good thing. You want to change the width of that lane for a little bus bay on the right-hand side, shall we say. So we need to go into this Edit Targets, and that's how you do it. We're going to, first of all, draw, in this case, it could be a 3D polyline, 2D polyline for the alignments, 3D if you want to do the elevation as well. I'm going to use, in this case, an actual alignment and a profile to play around with, just give me a little bit more control than a 3D polyline, but you could use either. So I'm going to actually start with a 2D polyline. I'm going to start with it here, draw a little piece of straight line segment, and then start with a few arcs. And I'm doing it actually on the bend of the corridor, doesn't matter. I'm going to arc out to there, arc back into about, two more snaps off would be good. About there somewhere. Slight arc around there, and bring it back in. And where I'm starting and stopping is the first line out from the centre line of the road, which is the lip of my gutter. So let's go try and get it roughly tangential there, go back to those snaps. Yep, and a little piece of line just to finish off. Okay, so that's going to be my little bus bay widening, or parking bay, whatever it happens to be. I've just sketched in a approximately now, but you can obviously sketch them with more detail yourself, make sure the radii and things are correct. So that's just a polyline at the moment. I'm going to convert that to an alignment. So we go alignment, alignment from objects. It's going to be that polyline I'm going to select. Little arrow on here, so it's going to run in that direction. Doesn't really matter which direction it runs in, so that's fine. And we're going to call this bus bay. So it's going to be a type of, well, it won't be a center line, so I'm going to put it on miscellaneous just to keep them separate. We don't want design criteria, and let's say we can leave it on that style, I guess, for alignment style, but I don't want any labels. So go no labels. I don't want any curves between my tangents, and yeah, we'll erase that polyline for now. So, well, actually, we will erase that polyline, so that'll be fine. We go OK, and it's converted it for us. This little exclamation mark means it's not quite tangential at that point. If you don't want to see those, you can just go into the style. You should just right-click, go Edit Alignment Style, and on the, we can turn off this little warning symbol. It's probably the easiest way in the Display tab, and that'll disappear. Okay, so that's what I want to widen out to. The way we do that is to pick that corridor. We go to Edit Targets, and then on the command line it says Select a region to edit. You move your cursor over the region of your corridor. In this case, it's one big region, so the highlights in blue when you move over it. So I click on that, and within that region, I can change or override some of these sub-assemblies we put together. If you recall, the road sub-assemblies, these lane super-elevation AOR on the right or the left, can be overridden, as can the shoulder by the look of it. So find the sub-assembly you want. In this case, we're running the alignment from south to north, so the left is on the west side, the right is on the east, so it's going to be the lane super-elevation AOR on the right. That's the line I want to work with. You've got two lots of targets. You've got the width targets, which control the horizontal width, these ones, and these slope or elevation targets change the elevation of the edges of those sub-assemblies. We'll come back to that one in a minute. But let's do the width first of that on the right, that lane on the right. Where it says none, you just click on the word none. There's several things we can target. This one's an alignment we're going to use, but it could also be feature lines, survey figures, and 2D or 3D polylines. Either of those, any of those are fine. But we're going to go alignments. I'm going to pick on screen to make sure I get the right one with the green icon and click the alignment we just drawn. Go enter. Finds that one for us, and you need to click this Add button to add it in to that panel. If you've got multiple objects to target, you get this option down here. Do you want to, if they overlap each other, do you want to target the nearest one or the furthest one? That's not a problem for us at the moment, so we just go OK, and then go OK again. The corridor rebuilds because it's on rebuild automatic. And we've got our widening done. So again, you've built this thing in 3D. We want to have a look what's happening in the object viewer. So have a look in the object viewer. Give it a rotate. And there's our first part of the bus bay. So that's the width changed. Now if you look carefully, you'll see that we've told it to adjust the width, and it's maintained the same crossfall all the way across, and then put the curb on it and the batter slopes. Quite often, people want to put in a drain down the centre here, a little dish drain, and change the slope of the roadway so it's becoming positive or rising up towards the curb in the area of one of these sort of widenings for a bus bay or parking bays. So we can do that, but that's a few extra steps, but let me show you how you do that just to get a little bit more into the intermediate level sort of side of corridors. So everything else is looking good, so I'm happy with that. haven't disturbed anything else on my corridor, so we're all good to go. To do that, we need to make a new assembly to apply in just this area. So what I'm going to do is come and find my assembly I've created previously, pick the green center line to select the whole thing. I can go Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and just make a copy of it. Oops, that's not quite what I wanted. We need to do that AutoCAD copy. So select the object, go CO to copy, or right click and go Basic Modify Tools, top copy, and then from there to there. Yep, Control V is not the way to do it that way. So it's made it, duplicated it. It will have given it not much of a name, so I'm going to select it, go into the assembly properties, which is properties for the whole thing, and change its name to Bus Bay. Okay, so I'll be able to select it more easily now. Now what I want to do is play around with this right-hand side where we've made our bus bay. So I'm going to pick that piece of lane. I'm going to right-click. Remember, that's always when playing with these things. Use the right-click, go Copy To, and I'm going to place it again on the end here. Now I've got things overwriting. We don't want that. So I'm going to pick that one, which is my curb, and that one, which is my batter slope, and I want to move those out to the outside. So go right-click again, Move To, and put them on that red circle. Or the grey squares work equally as well. So now we put an extra piece of lane in here, and I want to reverse the slope of that so it's going upwards as we move out towards the curb. So I'm going to select it, bring up the AutoCAD properties or the sub-assembly properties from the ribbon and the parameters, and instead of -2 I'm going to make it +2. Just get rid of the minus, apply the change. You can see it's changed in the background there, and so I'm happy, so I'll close that now. Oops, not quite happy. What I wanted to do is just change the width of that just a little bit as well, so let's go and change the width. I'm just going to make it a default 1 meter width. Don't have to do this, but it just helps me to keep track of what I'm doing. So it's just a little stub is what we're making. Now what we're going to do is, instead of widening this roadway lane, we're going to widen this stub as well instead. So there's our new assembly. Let's go back to our corridor. In order to apply that new piece of assembly into here, we need to make a new region in this corridor, well, it's a region of a corridor, it's a small piece of corridor. So I'm going to pick my corridor, and up in the ribbon we've got an option here for split region. So I'm going to come in there and say I want to split this big main region. And where's my split line going to be? You can see there's a little red running line here. I'm going to split it about, well, where those two short pieces of straight on the end of my alignment, I'm going to go partway through one of those. I'm just going to split it there, and you can see we've now got one region there and one region there, highlighting in blue when I move across them. I want another split down here, which will be there, partway through that little piece of straight on my alignment, at the beginning of my alignment, and hit escape to finish the command. Now we've got additional regions, and you get these grips for the end of each region. You can actually adjust those if you want them somewhere else using those grips, the diamond grip in the middle. I think I've got those in the right place, so let's find out. What I want to do now is change the assembly in that region. So if I pick my corridor again, underneath the Modify Region drop-down in the ribbon, we've got a button that says Region Properties. In there, we can select that. It says I want to look at that particular region we've just created, and it brings up the properties of that region, and it tells us what assembly we're using there currently. Currently there it's main, but I want to click on that, click the ellipsis button off to the side, and change it to the bus bay. Go OK and OK, and OK. And you'll see now that things have changed up a little bit. Now, what it's still doing is extending the main side of the road, the left side of the road, all the way out to that alignment. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to change that target. So what I'm going to do is edit the targets for that region. It's great having these things up in the ribbon now. They never used to be there, and it just makes it so much easier. So this one here, the bus bay alignment that I had before, for lane super elevation AOR on the right, is the one I set before. Now I want to change the other lane AOR super elevation on the right, but I want to make sure I get the right one. So it'd be nice to be able to change that name, and in fact you can. So let's just cancel out of here for a moment, come back into this. What I'd like to do is come back up into my my assembly, pick that little stub of roadway that I made there, and go into the sub-assembly properties again for it, and I can rename it. And I'm going to keep that whole name there, except I'm going to put stub on the end of the name. So that now, I might need to rebuild the corridor for that one. Now when I come back into here, my bus bay, pick the corridor, go edit targets for that bus bay region. Now I can see the lane super elevation AOR stub is that one, and that's the one I want to have the target on. So I'm going to change the one I had set previously, click where it says bus bay, click that alignment down the list down the bottom, and remove it by hitting the red X. And we go OK. And then I'm going to change it to the lane super elevation AOR. Well, in fact, can we? Yeah, no, do this all first. Then I'm going to change it to the stub. So instead, the stub is going to widen out to the bus bay. So again, I could pick on screen. It is a good idea to get used to picking on screen to make sure you get the right one. It's going to widen out to that alignment, especially if you've got a lot of alignments in your drawing, which you can have, and then add it in. We go OK. So now I've got the bus bay on the stub sub-assembly. Go OK. The road changes. You should find that we've got the main road running all the way through down here, and we've got this other piece of stub widening out to follow that alignment we've created, and then coming back in again. So let's have a look in 3D. And if we look closely there, you can see here's the lane, and there's the reverse and the crossfall coming back up to where the curbs are now added on, and where the alignment and the alignment in the corridor and the edge of the corridor or edge of the lane come together, that stub has zero width, so that's just fine. I can handle that quite happily. All right. What you might have noticed, if you look carefully at these things, these are, well, corridors do not support curves. They are the cross-sectional shape and straight lines in between each one, connecting them together. So where you've got curves in here, that on that alignment that we had drew earlier, these will be following those curves with a series of straight lines. Now you may want to close up the transverse lines on this corridor, those where the cross-sectional shape is applied, and they're called the frequency lines, or the frequency of the corridor. So we can actually increase the frequency to make those curves sample a little bit better. Let's go do that. So again, pick the corridor. Up in the ribbon, we've got Edit Frequency right next to Edit Targets. So we can go Edit Frequency. We can pick the region, or click inside the region that we want to edit the frequency on. Again, if you don't know what it's asking you for, look down at the command line, and it says select region to edit. So I'm going to click that one. And to put in some manual ones, you just hit this little plus down the bottom here. Having clicked that, it has a little runner that runs along the alignment, and you can have a bit of a look at the curves on your alignment. Say, okay, I might want 2 more points in there, so I'm just left-clicking where I want a new point, maybe 1 in there. 1 in there should do, and maybe a couple in there would be good. Come on further down, that's all okay through there. 1 in there, 1 in there, and probably 2 in there. So you've clicked a whole bunch of points where you want extra frequencies. We go enter, and it's written those change values in there. We go OK, and you can see extra frequency values have been added now along those curves. Probably could have done with another one in there, but it's fine. For now, the process is the same. So let's have a look in the object viewer, and we should be seeing that that's sampling that curve a lot more nicely. Okay, that's good. So we've got a 2% crossfall at the moment for that that little bus bay, but perhaps we've got driveways and things we need to match levels for along the edge of the bus bay. As well as widening it horizontally, we can change the edge of this using a profile on that alignment that we drew. So that's just another target. Let me show you how to use that target. We'll do something fairly extreme, but it'll just show you how you can modify both the width and the height of the edge of these roadway lanes. So I'm going to pick my alignment that I drew out here for my bus bay, and up in the well, in fact, let's make a surface out of this first. Let's make a corridor surface first, because we'll need that for a reference. Let's go and do that. So to make a corridor surface, you pick your corridor. Once again, up in the ribbon, you get the options, things you can do with a corridor. We've got a button here that says corridor surfaces. Click on that one. To make a surface out of a corridor, you pick this first icon on the left, which puts an entry in the table down below. Dean Road top. It's going to be a top surface we're going to make. Give it a style. Let's go for contours 0.5 of a meter. And then we simply tell it, of all the links or the lines in the assembly that we made in the cross-sectional shape, we want to choose the ones we're going to make our surface from. Now all the ones on the top are called top, and if you want the bottom surface of it, all the ones on the bottom are called datum. Now let's do the top surface, and to make that happen, you add that data in by hitting the plus on the right. And so you've got the name of the surface and you've got the data that it's using. You then go to the boundaries tab. You always want to do both, so there's 2 tabs in here. Do one first, then the second. The boundaries, there's our surface we've made. You can right click on it, and let's just do corridor extents as outer boundary. And go OK. Now we're getting our contours of our surface showing up here. So let's pick, again, anything you made in 3D and Civil3D. You're seeing it in just 2D here in plan view. Always pick it, right click object viewer to go and make sure you haven't stuffed anything up. So that's looking okay at the moment, but I know there will be something not quite right with this. Let's go and have a look very closely at the bus bay. Oops, self-lost here. Okay, if we're not looking at the bus bay, if I can get a good angle on this, there we go. You can see our curbs are lining up and constructing themselves very well. Where we've got the bus bay and we've got those frequency points very close together, the curbs, you can see by the contour here, sometimes will not know how to triangulate properly because they've got the frequencies so close together. The software, it could go one way, could go the other, depending on to construct the triangulation of the surface. So if you ever see that, and sometimes you see that when you use the intersection builder as well. We've got the same thing down this end. A little bit easier to see perhaps. It's just triangulating the wrong way across that that curve. We can put in some automatic break lines there, and let me show you how to do that. Very useful thing to know. So if we pick our corridor again, go into exactly where we were before, corridor surfaces. We've got our Dean Road top surface, and there's the top links being used to construct it. Once we've done that, we can actually change the data type to feature lines, which are the longitudinal lines of the corridor. And if we add in the correct ones of those around the curb, we can put in those as dynamic break lines and force the triangulation of the surface to match the corridor. So the ones I happen to know we need, you do need to know the names of these, and I'll show you where to find that in a moment. We want the ones around the curb, which are the flow, and these are the ones you use most of the time. The flange of the curb, the flow line gutter of the curb, and the top of the curb. These are the most common ones you'll use. So you add those three longitudinal lines in to the list down the bottom here, and they become break lines. We go OK. Should have recalculated that surface, and it has. And let's just have a look at that now in the object viewer. You can see from the contour that it's already fixed it. But yeah, that's looking a lot smoother and correct now. Okay. So let me just show you where the names of those came from. I happen to know those because I've used them so many times, but they're actually components of one of your sub-assemblies. In this case, it was the curb that was not forming up correctly in the surface. So if we go to Curbs and Shoulders, right-click on Urban Curb and go to General, which is the one we used, and go to the Help file. Right down the bottom of this is the coding diagram. And the ones I used were P1, P2, and P3 from the diagram. So P1 is flange, P2 is the flow line gutter, and P3 is the top of curb. You could have put in P4 as well, but that wasn't a problem in my instance. P4 would be the back of the curb. So if you're ever needing those, that's where you find them in the help files for the particular sub-assemblies. Again, this session is being recorded, so you can come back and work through this at your leisure if it's going a little bit fast for you at the moment. Alright, so there's our surface in there. And what I want to do is change now the elevation of the outside of that, that bus bay. The reason, let me get rid of these things. The reason why I wanted that surface is to give me a reference point, and you'll see that when I build it. So let's go and pick on our alignment. Go surface profile for that alignment out of the launchpad. Launchpad is things you might want to do once you've finished working with that object that you've just picked. So the alignment is the bus bay, that's correct. Let's put in the top surface of the corridor, which is the one we just created, and also let's have the EG as well. Top surface of my corridor, I might just change its style to design conceptual. Design conceptual would be fine. Go OK. And go draw and profile view. Again, I'm only using this for design at this stage. I'm not plotting it out, so I'm just going to accept all the defaults. I'm going to create profile view and put it underneath here. So here's my EG surface, and that is the line of the currently the edge of the gutter, or the flange point that is running along that alignment. So if I had some driveways at known elevations, or they might have been surveyed previously, and that you'll see them in this green surface line if that's the case, you may want to make sure that the corridor hits those particular points so that you've got the elevations correct to match the pre-existing conditions. Let's do something extreme in this particular instance. I'm going to bring my edge of my curve along, partway through my bus bay. I'm going to come down to the ground surface and then go back up again, just so we can actually see it happen. But this could be anything that you want to match into, any surface you want to match into. So to do that, I'm going to draw a new design profile. Go Profile Creation Tools, going to match it into this profile view. Don't want design criteria. The name is going to be bus bay edge, or profile if you like, profile shall we say. And that should be okay. So what I want to start doing is start laying it out. Let's draw tangents. Now you can put in curves and things as well if you want, but just for, well, you probably would, but just for speed here, I'm going to just snap it with straight line segments. It'd be fairly close, but you could do whatever you liked, of course, and then bring it back up. In fact, I'm going to put a couple of curves in here just on the main points. So let's go curves, free vertical curve, PVI based, one in here. We'll do that. One in here. Oops, I've got the design constraints on. We'll do that. We'll do that. Okay. Just curve it out a little bit. All right. So this becomes another target we can use, a vertical target. So let's pick our corridor again. Edit targets for our bus bay region, and here's our vertical targets, this grouping down the bottom. Now I know it's the stub I want to change, so where it says none there, we go for what to target. There are things we can target: feature lines, survey figures, 3D polylines. In this case I've done a profile because it gives me more control. I can put those curves in and play around with it after the fact. So we did an alignment and profile in this case, but it doesn't have to be. So we've got a profile, the alignment is the bus bay, and it's the bus bay profile. But if I don't know which one of those it is, I can go pick on screen and say I want the edge of my bus bay to now follow that design profile that we drew. And yes, it is the one called bus bay profile. You need to hit the add button to put in the table down the bottom. You go OK and OK. And now we should see there's a major change in the batter slopes there, which is what you'd expect. Check it out in the object viewer. This will be fairly extreme. There we go. You can see what's happened to the crossfall. We've got our 2% crossfall here, but in the bus bay it's done our dramatic change in there, so you can definitely see that it's happening. Get a big twist in the side of it. So we've widened out to the alignment and then changed its elevation to match that drastic profile that we've drawn. And obviously that's dynamic, so I can go back to, well, it may not be obvious, but I can go back to my profile here and say, okay, well that's not actually where I wanted it. Let's bring that. I need to remove some of these points first though, just to allow me to move those more easily. Should have got rid of the other one too. Never mind. I'll do it quickly. Now you can see I've got it on Reboot Automatic, so every time I make a change it readjusts itself. So you might want to turn that off by the time you've got a lot of these things in here, it's taking longer and longer for the corridor to rebuild itself. But as you can see, those changes have happened straight away. And we've got a much less dramatic change in there now. Although still a lot more than what you'd want to accept. Okay. So, the last thing to look at is I want some cogo points output from this to, just in the last 5 minutes we've got here, to make a file or output to a CSV file. Now, when you pick your corridor, you've got an option up under the Launchpad here to create points from corridor. And basically just tick on and off the bits that you want the corridor to create points from. So it might be the top of curb, shift through to there and turn those all off, and maybe the crown, the centre line of the road, and the back of the curb. Possibly daylight points as well, which is the edge of the batter slopes. If I go OK, you'll see it generates a whole heap of points. So it's basically everywhere there's one of these transverse lines in the corridor, it creates a point. Now that might be okay if you can live with that. Most people that's too many. So let me just undo that. Create points from corridor. What I tend to like doing more than that is to actually make points from the surface that we've created, the top corridor surface. So the way I would do that is go up in here under Points, and Home tab of the ribbon, and Points Creation Tools. There's this button here to make random points on a surface. So it gets the elevation from the surface. So I click on that one. You can do it along a polyline, etc. if you've got those already set out, but I tend to use random points. So select the surface, so it's going to be my corridor surface here. And it's just specify, looking at the command line, just specify a location for the new point. So if I want a center line, I can choose anywhere on the center line. I'll turn my O-snaps on. The point description on the command line here, I'm going to call it CL. And I can then work my way along the center line for anywhere and go enter. So it's just left click, enter. Make sure you're O-snapping onto the right thing. Left click, enter. And it's getting the elevations from the surface along the center line. So it gives many of those where you want them at the points that you want them. The next thing you might want is top of curb. So I'll move my cursor over to the top of curb, which will be this green line, I think I'll find. No, begging your pardon, it won't be the green line, it'll be the cyan one. This one here. So that's from the center line, 1, 2, 3, third line out. Click on there, and I'm going to call it TK. So it's now a point called TK, and anywhere else on that cyan line, I can get the TK points. So I can choose where I want them. And again, the daylight ones, click there, change the point description to daylight. And I can get as many daylight points as I want then. And you just change the description every time you want a different description. Click on the point and change the description. And just choose where you want them for your setup points. So to get those out as a CSV file, I think I've got 2 minutes left. Make a point group out of those and export the point group. So from the tool space over here, we've got point groups. Currently they've got the all points. You want to make a new point group. Call it setouts, whatever makes sense to you. We're going to go to the include tab, include with raw descriptions, which is what we've written, matching TK, CL, day, exclamation mark. They're not case sensitive. And make sure that it's actually worked. We go to the points list and it lists all the ones it's found and it's grabbed them correctly. So I'm happy with that. We go OK. And there's our point group done. There's our setup points. And to get those in a CSV file, we right-click on them, go Export Points, limit them to the point groups, the points in the point group set out, choose our format, PENZ, comma delimited, we go OK, and save it on the desktop, and call it, set out. And go OK. So have a look back at my desktop here. There's my set out text points. That's my CSV made. Okay. Well, essentially, that's the end of the demo. What I wanted to show you was the as an introduction to the corridors, and taking it to that extra stage to the how the widening and the elevation changes worked, the targets. So let me just have a quick question before we finish up, or see if there's any questions here that haven't been answered. It's looking okay. Looks like they've all been answered, so that's good. So just before we leave you, Autodesk does this a CSAT survey, customer satisfaction program. If you ever get that, if they ever ask you, just realise that only scores above 7 or 8 are considered as being positive. Anything below a 7 is considered as negative feedback. So if you're not intending it to be negative feedback, make sure your score is above 7 or 8. In fact, 7 or 8 are both neutral, so if you want to actually be positive, it has to be a 9 or 10. So it's a bit of a strange survey, but nonetheless, that's the way it's done if you ever see one of those. Finally, thank you for listening in today. I hope you have a good week, and I hope the rest of the year goes well for you. I'll see you next time.